Hey, everybody. Welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano, and we are pleased to be joined tonight by Matt and Leslee Holliday. Matt, of course, played in the major leagues for many years with the Rockies, A's, Cardinals, and Yankees, seven-time MLB All-Star. But, of course, the hero of this baseball journey is the wife, Leslee Holliday, and together they're hosting the Table 40 podcast, which we're going to talk about in just a second. Matt and Leslee, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How you guys doing?
We're good this morning.
Good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So good to talk to you. So good to see you. And let's start with the podcast. You guys are doing what I'm doing. You're hosting a podcast now, and we're just so pleased and thankful to have you be a part of the Sports Spectrum, this new Sports Spectrum podcast network with Table 40. So we'll start with Leslee, ladies first here. Tell us, because this was really, I think, your yearning and desire to kind of start this podcast. Tell us about why you felt led to start it and what Table 40 is all about.
You know, Jason, I felt called to ministry about 2015 when I was at a table with a bunch of girlfriends. And like, to be real honest, the story kind of goes like this. I have a friend that was getting divorced, and she was married to one of Matt's teammates, and she was getting divorced. And we were at a table kind of talking about what that was going to look like. And I noticed that on one side of the table were the girls that followed the Lord or were Christians, and on the other side of the room were the non-Christians. And she kind of gravitated towards the non-Christians at that time because it was honestly a better environment. It was a lot more compassionate environment. And I kind of thought to myself after that dinner, man, we're doing something wrong as Christians and as women in sports. And I was real bothered by it. So I prayed through that and decided to go back to school. So I started this biblical studies degree in 2015. I'm still doing it because we have 4 kids and 4 dogs. I graduate next May, which I'm excited about. And then I'll go on and get a master's. But that's neither here nor there. But the point is that I felt real called to ministry back then. And I always had this desire to learn more about Jesus, but really understand him so I could represent him well and represent him with grace and love and not like legalism and rules. And so fast forward a bunch of years, I've taught at little conferences and I've done things and I've led Bible studies and we lead a college ministry here in Stillwater, Oklahoma, but I wanted to always do ministry with my buddy. And so this podcast came about. I was talking to a friend, and it just seemed like a great opportunity for us to have conversations, and Matt and I have an opportunity to talk to people and really try to represent Jesus as he's intended to be represented. And so that's the goal of the podcast. And Table 40 is, it's kind of designed around, or I guess the foundation of the podcast is designed around Psalm 40, which is basically, short version, it's pits and praises, and our salvation is received, it's not achieved, it's not by works, it's by just the grace of God. And so we can't boast about that kind of stuff, and we Christians need to be people that love one another well and meet people where they are. And so I just had a desire all those years ago, watching my friend go through something really, really hard, and I just felt the Christians didn't do it right. And so I wanted to learn how to do it right, and now we're involved in what I consider ministry with Table 40. So I'm thrilled, and I appreciate
it's definitely ministry, and I've been honored to be a part of it with you guys. Matt, what's it been like for you? Because initially Leslee was hosting this, and then she was like, "I'm going to bring Matt along with me," and you kind of had to help be a part of this too. And I'm guessing you haven't done a lot of podcast hosting in your past. So what's this been like?
Well, Jason, as you know, I'm just the eye candy. You know,
right.
He is.
I'm just here to when we started talking about it, and you start talking about kind of all the people and all the people that the Lord has placed in our path over the last 20 years together. We start thinking about getting a chance to catch up with those people and share their stories and share all the things that we've learned, and got a chance to be around a lot of great people from all walks of life. You start thinking about kind of the impact, especially in this time where we have a lot of time on our hands, where we weren't really working or doing a whole lot, and it gives us something to look forward to. And we look forward to having conversations with old friends, new friends. Just kind of, we put our list together of all the people that we would love to have on the podcast. It's a pretty cool list. It's a pretty cool kind of variety of different people from different walks of life that we feel like we can share, and hopefully it encourages people. And I think that ultimately, like I said, right now, our college kids and some of the stuff that was fulfilling to us that we were doing with ministry kind of got just yanked out from under us in basically a day or two. So this gives us, like I said, a kind of a platform to kind of share what's important to us and use it with a lot of our friends. And hopefully there's some good, funny stories along the way that we tie into some really good truths about who Jesus is.
Yeah, it's been really cool to be a part of it with you guys and watch who you've been talking to, and certainly teammates and former teammate wives, if you will, with Adam Wainwright and Lance Berkman having been on the show. But then friends like Don Christensen, when you're talking finances and stewarding wealth properly, and even the most recent interview that was released just yesterday, May 20th, with Jackie and Ken Kendall, which, I mean, you just kind of, tee them up and let them go, especially Jackie, and she's wonderful. So it's really been awesome to kind of watch you guys do your thing. And again, it's called Table 40. You can learn about it on the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network. It's on sportspectrum.com, and Table 40 is available everywhere podcasts are found. I'm sure I'll mention that a few times, so go subscribe there. I really want to ask you guys about how you met, because we actually have something in common here. My wife and I met on a blind date in 1997 and married a few years later in 99. And I've read, you guys can share the full story here, Leslie, that you guys met on a blind date as well. Is that right?
We did. I was in a sorority at OSU, and we actually had a fire drill. And so we're all outside in the middle, in like 2:00 in the morning. And my friend Jennifer was like, "Hey, I've been looking for you. I would love for you to go on this date with my best friend's best friend," or whatever. And so anyway, so I was like, "Yeah, whatever. That'll be fine." And so we did. We met on a blind date and kept dating.
Well,
So,
I
I don't want to embarrass you. I didn't want to tell them.
There was a couple times where we were supposed to do something or go on a blind date, or she was coming to the place where I was working at the time, and she didn't show up. So it took a couple times where I was like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if she's interested or not interested, or so we ended up we all four piled in a car and went to a movie here in town. I don't know if anybody remembers. Well, they probably still do it, but when they kind of re-released the movies into a cheaper setting where you could get them, you could go to the movies for basically $1, $1.50,
of course,
whatever it was. So we went to the cheap movie. I don't even think we remember what it was, because usually when they wind up at the cheap movie, they're not very good. But we went to that. We kind of hit it off. We started talking. I think that night we sat on the porch at her sorority house and just talked until maybe 3:00 in the morning. And we just kind of hit it off, and we've been pretty much inseparable ever since.
Yeah, that's the better version.
Yeah,
I just didn't know.
We're just, a blind date. That just happened.
Well,
I didn't know.
It's funny because my story, I'm not going to share it all here, but it has similar tones to it, because my wife and I had set up this date to go with her that I don't hear from her a few days. And I'm thinking, this isn't going to happen. What's going on here? And then she's actually late to the restaurant that we were meeting at to go on our blind date. And I'm thinking, and there were no cell phones. There were no, internet or texting. I had a pager and a payphone. And again, it's a long story, but we have a lot of similarities in our meeting with our future wives. Now, I want to kind of go through the journey a little bit, and Matt, ask you, because you made your major league debut a few years later. It was April of 2004. You guys married, I believe, in December of 2000. So you've been married for a few years, had your first child, I believe, in 2003. So you're a young father, you're married for a few years, you're chasing your baseball dreams, you're accomplishing them, obviously, when you get to the majors. But I really have a question about now, when you look back, what do you wish you knew about marriage and parenting early in those years that you had to learn the hard way during your baseball journey, especially early on as you're trying to navigate being a pro baseball player, a major league baseball player, and sort of have this new life happening with a wife and a kid?
I think the one thing that stands out, kind of the word, is selfishness. I think as a young athlete, that you're so focused on achieving the goal that you're talking about, making it to the major leagues, and then once you get there, all you ever hear as a minor leaguer is, "Oh yeah, well you can. It's easy to make it, but to stay is really what's hard." And so I guess when you hear all those tones, that's the challenge when you do get that call up to the major leagues. And I started off, I think, 0 for 9 or 0 for 6 or over, and I immediately went, "Oh gosh, if I don't get a hit soon, I'm headed right back to the minor leagues." But I think Jackson, our firstborn, was very colicky, extremely challenging for us, for Leslee, particularly. Just needed to be held, needed to be rocked, needed to be walked. Didn't sleep much, and it was very. I would say, that was the biggest strain on our marriage. In our 20 years, almost 20 years of marriage, just I guess the balance of, I need to get sleep because I have to play. I'm trying to achieve, like you said, this goal of getting to the major leagues and then sticking in the major leagues. And it was, I would say, yeah, like you said, I would say that was probably the most challenging part. But I was still very young and immature in my faith, immature probably just in general, with, I think, not considering how difficult it was for her and what she was going through. I was more centered around how this was affecting me, and what could this cost me if I wasn't getting sleep, and doing all of the little things that I felt like had got me to that point where I was knocking on the door of all the hard work that I had put in. And so I would just say, like, the more considerate, and I think the better our marriage has gotten, when I would consider her feelings and what I guess is how can I serve her first, was probably the thing that I look back on and say, golly, I was just not very good at that.
Yeah. Leslie, how about from your end? What was that like early on, trying to navigate becoming a wife to a major leaguer, and just marriage and, becoming a mom? How about that for you?
Well, here's the deal. So everything Matt says is true. I agree with it 100%. But look, it says in Romans 8:28, right? It's probably the most famously quoted scripture in all time. But
Yeah.
that stuff did work together for our good, because it built this capacity for grace for young couples. And so when they come over to our house or at our whatever in our circle of influence, and they're like, man, we were struggling, we were like, yeah, you're gonna be all right, let's talk about what it is. And so, because we did, I mean, it was very difficult for us to navigate marriage early. And I know for me, like, I'm a worker, and so I never asked him for help. And one of the arguments that we would get into continuously
Yeah.
as a young couple was, Matt's like, I can't read your mind. And I'm like, what? I mean, I put off some serious passive aggressive clues throughout the day that I'm frustrated. I mean, the huffing and the puffing and the staring and all of those things, because early in marriage, we just didn't know how to communicate. Like, I considered raising Jackson as my primary job, and that's how I was going to serve Matt. But man, I was exhausted, because he was not only colicky, but he had all these health issues. And so we were in therapy, and we were doing all this crazy stuff, and I was worn out. But I didn't understand how to tell him that I'm tired and I need some help. And I kind of felt like that was like a chink in my armor, so to speak, that I couldn't handle it all. And so we learned the hard way a lot of really valuable lessons. And I think for us, that also factors into why we're passionate about doing the podcast, passionate about talking to younger couples, because it was a grind. And I do believe that because of our the Bible also says, like, faith of a mustard seed, right? So we both were Christians, but it was mustard seed type of faith. I mean, we were very, very immature in our in our relationship with the Lord. And it was more like we held tightly to the commitment we made to one another, because we knew that was what God said to do, but it was ugly.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that. Walk me through the faith component of your marriage, maybe where you were when you get married, the evolution of your faith, and what you learned about having Christ at the center versus, I always tell people, he can be a piece of your life or he can be the centerpiece of who you are. There's a difference there of having Christ be a part of your life, but really being the center of your marriage. Can you kind of walk us through that evolution? Maybe I'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's probably where we were at the time, like you just talked about, where he was a piece of our life. And I think we both knew what we wanted. But I think as athletes, it's very difficult to put him at this. It's always, to me, I think, a tricky part when you're served and you're told your worth is tied up into how your performance is. You're constantly the clubhouse guys are picking up anything you need or doing anything you need, and everything is about keeping you healthy and keeping you on the field and keeping you performing well. And if you perform well, then the team likes you and the fans love you, and you kind of it's all about performance driven, which, as we know, is the complete opposite of the gospel.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a hard, concept as a young guy, that's to put Jesus at the center and sort of know that that's where your worth and your value is, and to play with that kind of freedom. I missed out on a lot of that, and I feel like that that to me didn't happen until later in my career, and I think, we've kind of been equally yoked, I would say, which is part of, I think, what's been the beauty of our marriage is that we've grown together, and we encourage and push one another, and obviously her going back to school and getting a biblical studies degree and looking at opportunities for a master's degree. And to me, that's very motivating and challenging to think that she's pursuing this hard after the education to go along with all of her aspirations of teaching and leading, and having 4 kids. And so I guess to answer that question, I would just say that over the years we've grown to go from what you talked about, where he was a part of our life, to where he becomes the center of our lives, and out of that center, our lives are sort of go out from there. Which, like I said, it's challenging as young athletes to grasp that concept when the world says complete opposite. And I mean, like I said, I miss that freedom to be able to perform and play every day, and know that your worth is not tied up into your performance.
Leslee, what was that like for you from your perspective of kind of growing as a couple with Christ at the center?
Yeah, I would share. I mean, Matt really did a great job answering that question, and I agree with him. Is at the beginning, it was just, I mean, we're from Oklahoma, and so everybody is a Christian in Oklahoma, right? And so it was just
Sure.
kind of like that's what you were supposed to do. And but I remember vividly getting married and really starting to grow in my relationship with the Lord, because we got married. Our honeymoon was on the way to a winter development camp in Denver, Colorado, and then you live with host families.
Yeah.
And so we had this really sweet host family named Kurt and Tammy Wells, and Matt was gone all day long doing all the things that the Rockies had him do, and I just would read book after book after book by Max Lucado. He was my guy back in the day.
Sure.
And so I just remember just really fascinated by actually the Word of God, and how Max Lucado would present the Word of God and like who Jesus was. And so, because I think at the beginning of our marriage, we were just culturally Christians. Like we felt, of course, we were real Christians, but we felt the desire to follow the Lord, but we just didn't know how to do it. And I think it clicked for me after we were married, reading all these books in the basement of the Wells house.
Yeah.
And I think it's just kind of like Matt Chandler is one of my favorite guys to listen to, and he kind of coined this term, progressive sanctification. And he basically says, like, look, sanctification is a process that we all go through, but it's a progressive process where we just move forward, and we have to continue to grow. And I would say that that's how our marriage has been. It's just been, man, every year you look back and you just a little stronger than you were the year before, and a little more, the focus is becoming more narrow as, we're focused on Christ a little more. So I don't think it was ever a big, huge jump. I just think it was real consistent that we were moving towards Jesus just little by little by little.
Yeah. Matt Holliday, Leslee Holliday are our guests here on Sports Spectrum today. Matt, it was 2009 when you came to St. Louis, and it's weird. You could talk to the Rockies fan base and you're probably more associated with them, but I think my dad's a huge Cardinals fan, and he still talks about you and certainly that team and that group of guys that you had together when you were there in St. Louis. I'm curious because you were 29 years old and sort of a little more certainly mature, and you were certainly established as a baseball player. What did that mean for you coming to St. Louis from a man, as a follower of Christ, growing in your faith when you came to a team that would eventually grow into what 2011's championship team from the outside looking in looked like it had a ton of guys that were really sold out for Christ? Can you kind of tell us about coming to St. Louis and what that did for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I headed into 2009, there was a lot of, into the off season after 2008, there was a lot of talk because I was about to be a free agent.
Yeah.
And Colorado was talking about moving on, trading me because they didn't think that they could re-sign me. That's a whole nother story. But
right.
Basically, I got traded to Oakland in that winter, I think November, December of 08. And then, to Oakland in 09, to somewhat of a difficult situation as far as headed into free agency. We were young in Oakland and not doing real well. I think Billy Beane thought that they were kind of on the verge of busting through with a young pitching staff, and he signed a bunch of veteran players, and a lot of the veteran players got hurt immediately, and the young pitchers weren't quite ready to compete.
Yeah.
And so they ended up trading me in July to the Cardinals, and I remember being obviously extremely excited because the Cardinals were in first or second place, and all of the just the excitement of playing for a storied franchise. And Albert Pujols, personally called me and says, "Hey, hurry up, get over here. You're playing tonight." Batting fourth, batting behind me. It was a really exciting time as I look back on it. This is going to be good. From a baseball standpoint, I thought this was going to be awesome to play for the Cardinals. I had no idea kind of the group of men that I was getting traded to and what ultimately would happen. But I remember being super excited to play in St. Louis and got there and performed really well. And we got to the playoffs. And I remember being around Adam Wainwright for the first time. I knew him from afar, and I knew about Adam Wainwright, but I didn't know Adam Wainwright. And getting to know Adam and Skip Schumacher and Chris Carpenter and the guys and how they went about their business, I was like, man, this is where I want to be. And going into free agency, all things, kind of have to work together for that to happen. And thank God, ultimately signed back with St. Louis.
Yeah.
And that group, it did, Lance Berkman comes over. Between Albert and Lance Berkman and Adam Wainwright and Skip Schumacher and Jake Westbrook comes over, and I'm probably leaving off some guys, but that group, like the Bible studies we had, and all of a sudden, you got 12 or 13 guys at Bible study, which sometimes on a group you'll have 12 or 15 guys go to chapel, which is less formal. A chapel is more like a church service where there's not much interaction, and you'll get guys that come and are curious. But to get 12 to 15 guys that come to an intimate Bible study where guys are participating and sharing and openly sharing and being vulnerable was incredible. And then on top of that, the teaching, I don't know, Lance Berkman, if people get a chance to be around him, just his knowledge of the Bible, and Wayno's the same.
Yeah.
It was just incredible, and how it came together, and ultimately to have the success we had on the field was just a kind of icing on the cake for me. Was all the things that I learned, and I told Lance. So Lance came back in 2012 after we won the World Series in 2011, and had some injuries. And unfortunately, it looked like that that was just going to be his last year in St. Louis. And basically, I just said, hey, we're going to breakfast every morning, and I want you to just give me everything you got. I want you to teach me, disciple me, show me, how you got to this point of your Bible knowledge. I mean, it just really is incredible. Like, he just understands the word and can speak it. And so we started going to breakfast every day, and I had a lot of growth then. Underneath just kind of with him and Wayno, and those friendships have continued on today. And then the conversion of Chris Carpenter that I think people probably know a little bit about. If not, You can find it on the PAO deal. But just kind of seeing Colby Rasmus and a lot of the guys that we got to be around and see that have life-changing. Jesus has changed their lives, and to see what they used to be and what they are now is very fulfilling. And just looking back on my time in St. Louis, very God-ordained that I got to be there, be a part of that. It was like I said, very, very just I don't know. It was perfect fit for me. And like I said, I talk to Adam, once a week, once every couple of days, and Skip and Chris, and then some of the other guys, Matt Carpenter now, the younger guys at the time, and just a real blessing with all the brothers in Jesus that we had, and in those years I was there.
Yeah, I love that. And Leslie, as I was reading, I believe you were leading some Bible studies, certainly doing some work with the wives of the Cardinals players. So this had to be an awesome opportunity for you to kind of grow in your faith and being around some of these ladies that whose husbands were, followers of Christ, and you get to kind of see it from the other perspective. What was that like for you?
Oh yeah, it was great. And I mean, when you are basically, the only reason I would lead some of the studies is if the chapel leader or Bible study leader was absent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't in charge, but
Sure.
they found a bunch of absences over the course of the years. And so the cool thing about leading is you really have to learn, because if you don't learn the stuff, then you're a terrible teacher. And so that had a lot to do with just kind of the Lord cultivating this desire to learn more, and man, I loved those times. And we would have the girls over when the guys were on the road at my house. And it was just really neat to understand just more about the cool thing about baseball. And something that I miss is you just get an opportunity to meet people from all over the place and all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of churches, and everyone has this story. And so for me, I love that, just getting to know women and getting to know where they came from, and their families and all of that. It was just great. And so I do miss that part for sure.
So last couple questions here with Matt and Leslie on Sports Spectrum. Matt, I want to ask you about retirement and how, I don't even know if I ever officially saw a Matt Holliday retirement announcement, which I don't think I have. Tell me if I'm wrong on that, but you haven't played in a few years, so I presume you're done since you've been coaching with your brother at Oklahoma State. What was that transition like to saying I'm not playing baseball anymore? Was that hard for you?
Yeah, I think as athletes, it's hard to envision yourself as not an athlete anymore. I mean, I think ever since you're a little kid, you've been playing baseball and other sports, and I just you get to the point where you start to weigh, I guess, the pros and cons of getting into another season, and what that does is we have 4 kids, 16, 13, 10, and 6.
Yeah.
And the time that it takes away from your family to prepare, and then ultimately through the season, and you get to later now, especially in your career, where if you're 38, 39 years old, you're considered kind of too old to play. And if you want to try to play, you kind of have to go and try to earn a spot, which I would never shy away from the competition. But it's just a tricky deal where I just got to the point where I felt like after, I kind of came back with the Rockies in 18 and performed well and felt like I would get some opportunities to go again in 19 and perform and lead and have a role in some places. And, nothing really came my way that I felt like was a good opportunity. And so I just didn't play anymore. And I don't really like the word retire because I'm 40 years old and feel like I'm in good shape. And I think I could still go and have a good at bat and play in the major leagues if given a chance. And so I'm not saying I'm trying to come back, but what I'm saying is that I don't need the kind of everybody congratulating me on my career part of that deal. I just kind of want to go away, It's one of those things where I just feel like when you're done, there's people will notice that I'm not playing anymore and that I'm doing something else. And like I said, I hate the word retire because I love to work and I love to do stuff, and I'm still part of baseball and I have a job and so I guess it's just semantics if you get down to it. I haven't sent the paperwork in, but to be honest with you, it's difficult, Jason. Like I think, like I said, you consider yourself an athlete, you consider yourself, and then all of a sudden it stops, and it stops fast. And I think that sometimes is hard because, like we talked about earlier, a lot of your worth is tied into your performance. And I think athletes, it's an adjustment to find your next place where you can feel like you're contributing, like you're doing something that's bigger than yourself. I don't have any hobbies. I don't play golf. I don't really fish that much. A lot of the time that people kill with retirement that they look forward to, I'm not very good at those things. So I just kind of moved on to what's next, and I love spending time with my family and my boys, my older boys are heavy into baseball, which has been good for me because I get a chance to go out and try to pass along the wisdom and knowledge that I've gained over 20 years. And so the long answer to a short question is that it's hard, man. I feel for guys that retire from their sport. There is definitely an adjustment period into what's next. And sometimes you wake up in the morning and having that purpose that you've had for all those years of, what you're getting ready for. Sometimes it's hard, and it really is. And I have compassion for guys that struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, I will say that you found a new hobby because you're a podcast co-host now. So that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. So Leslee and I are trying to think of hobbies that maybe I'm not good at it, but at least it takes up some time and I have to put in some preparation for it. And I get to catch up with some old friends like we talked about. Got a chance to have a conversation with Adam and Lance and Don and we got one with Jaime Garcia coming up, and then so it's like I say, it's been a good thing for us to kind of do together and have to talk about. So we've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, that was very well said, and thank you for sharing that. As we wind down, last question, and I'll leave it for Leslee here. What's been the biggest adjustment for you in Matt's post-baseball playing career? You notice how I worded that there. I won't say the word that you don't like there, Matt. But what's been...
You can say it. I just don't say it.
That's fine. But it's got to be different because now suddenly, we're all quarantined. So I guess we all got to kind of get used to having everybody home all the time in this pandemic. But he's all of a sudden home. And for you being a mom and kind of immersed in your 4 kids, and now Matt's here, he's not playing anymore. So what for you, as we wind down here again, has been sort of this adjustment and this maybe a lesson even that the Lord has shown you during this last, 18 months or so?
Yeah. I might be a little different than some of the wives. Our relationship's really fun. And so having Matt around a lot that's great. And he is very, now early in our marriage, I would have been like, let's go find something to do. But now, I mean, really, God's done a great thing in our relationship. And so he's very helpful with the kids. He's fun. He helps cook. He's a joy to be, I mean, genuinely, I'm being honest, like Matt's a joy to be around. I think my biggest challenge in his post playing days is I miss it. And so I miss, like, we've never lived anywhere for a full calendar year until after he quit playing or whatever. And so we lived in Oklahoma for 12 months, and it was like, wow, we actually did this. Because when you play during the season, or when you play, you move around like 2 to 3 times a year. And so you go to spring training, which is my favorite time of year. And then you do the season, and then you go to the off season. And so there was just a busyness and like he said, even for me, like an excitement of planning out your travel schedule and planning out, what your season's going to look like. And I don't know. I think for me, my big adjustment has just been the stillness of a post-playing career wife, and I loved his job, and I loved my friends, and I loved the busyness and the schedule of of being, I guess, a baseball wife. Like, it was a lot of fun for me. And my kids felt the same way. Like, when we moved back to Oklahoma, we didn't go, we were traveling probably once a week there for a couple years. And the kids were like, my gosh, we haven't been on a plane in 3 months. And I'm like, I know. And so anyway, so it's just a deal where I enjoyed that. I enjoyed going and doing and seeing and being around my buddies. And so for me, that part has been the hardest, is just being still in Oklahoma for 12 to 18 months. It has been a challenge, and one that we've talked about several times over the course of this time frame where he hasn't been working in pro sports. And so I'm an adventurer. And so it's been tough for me. But as far as having Matt, I think that's something that pro athlete wives, we need to work on a little bit, because it's such a funny thing when women will say those things about their husband. Oh, now he's home. I need him to leave. Well, then we need to work on some things in your marriage. Give us a call, and we're gonna help you work on that, because this is such a sweet time, and it's gonna go. We're healthy. We're young. Matt provided for our family to where he can be with us. Your kids get to have their father around. This is such a sweet, sweet, sweet time period. And shoot, Jackson's 16. He's gonna be moving out here in a couple years, and this is a sweet spot for our family. And I am so grateful that he's able to be with us. And I can't say enough about that. But I miss the adventure of the baseball seasons, so that part's been hard.
The new podcast is called Table 40. It is out now. It debuted April 15th. It's on the Sports Spectrum Podcast Network and available everywhere podcasts are found. Apple, Spotify, you name it, you can find it. Matt and Leslee Holliday have been our guests here on Sports Spectrum. Appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing a little bit of your story, and look forward to hearing more episodes of Table 40. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Jason. We really appreciate you helping us work through this and having us on, obviously, and just we really appreciate it.
Yeah, your leadership's been necessary, and so
my pleasure. Let's put it that way. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, buddy.